Hello, friend. Welcome to Shepherd My Heart. My name is Pamela. Thank you for joining today. Today, I will be sharing about something we're probably all familiar with. When Jesus spoke to Peter saying, "Get behind me, Satan." What does this mean, and what does it mean for us today? First, I want to look at Matthew 16 through 17, ESV version. And this is Peter responding to Jesus when he asked, "Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." Jesus had just praised Peter for recognizing him as the Christ and said, "Blessed are you." But just a few verses later, Jesus says something shocking. Let's look at Matthew 16:21 through 23. It says, "From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised." And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord. This shall never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." What happened in this transition? Jesus had just told his disciples before this that victory was coming. In Matthew 16:18 and 19, he says, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." And then in Matthew 16:21, Jesus begins to tell his disciples the hard truth that he must suffer and die and rise again. This did not fit Peter's expectations of a victorious Messiah. To him, Jesus had just told him that they were going to have victory, that even the gates of hell would not prevail against him, and that they would be given the keys of the kingdom of heaven. He loved Jesus, and he couldn't bear the thought of losing him. So Peter does what many of us do. He tries to correct the plan of God. He rebukes Jesus and says, "This shall never happen to you." How many times have we tried to correct the plan of God in our lives? "God, surely this is not where you want me. Surely you don't want me to walk through this valley. Surely your plan is better than this." Peter's reaction reveals something we all face, the temptation to interpret God's promises through the lens of comfort and logic rather than truth. Did Peter even hear Jesus say that he would rise again on the third day? Or was he fixated on Jesus telling them he would suffer and die? The disciples loved Jesus and believed in him as their Messiah. What Jesus was saying about himself struck them at the core of what they were believing. And Peter, rebuking Jesus, tried to correct him and align him with what he believed about their Messiah, about what he believed the plan should be. Have you had something you are believing God for, but everything in your life is happening contrary to how things should happen in order for it to be fulfilled? It seems like God is not working for you. In fact, it appears that he's working against you. Instead of complaining to God, this is an opportunity to ask him, "What do you want me to know about this? Help me to see through the lens of truth and how you are using my circumstances to fulfill your promise." God gave Joseph a dream that his family would be bowing before him, and he was pleased with this dream. But he did not see God did not give him a dream of the suffering that would happen along the way. God used that suffering to prepare Joseph for the fulfillment. But prior to that, he was thrown into a pit. He was sold into slavery. He was put in prison. And all these before he was able to realize the dream that God had given him as a young man. All these things were preparing him, were humbling him, were bringing him in alignment with God's truth about who God was and who he was. Jesus turned toward Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Was Jesus calling Peter Satan? I don't believe he was. He was identifying the spirit behind Peter's words, a distraction from God's plan. Satan had already tempted Jesus in the wilderness and tried to get him to reject the plan that God had for him. And here he tries again through someone Jesus dearly loved. And Jesus responds, "You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on things of God, but on things of man." He was letting Peter know that he was allowing Satan to direct his thoughts and beliefs, just as he still does us today. Trying to direct our thoughts and beliefs against God, against truth, especially when God's timing or methods confuse us. We cling to what makes sense or what feels good. But Jesus invites us to trust truth, not our temporary understanding. Jesus loved Peter, and he knew what his suffering and death would do to him and his disciples. He was preparing them for what was ahead and giving them hope. He would rise again. How quickly we get our minds off the things of God. We view our circumstances through the lens of what makes sense to us rather than the truth God wants us to know. Sometimes people in our lives speak things that are hurtful or untrue, stirring up emotions in us that bring separation. God is teaching me to address the spirit behind the words and not the person. People are not our enemy. This allows us to respond in love to the person and reject the words of our enemy, just as Jesus did. Jesus loved Peter and addressed the lies he was believing. He rejected the spirit behind Peter's words. Jesus is instructing us to align our minds with God, to walk in truth. God does not ask us to figure everything out. He asks us to trust him. The voice of the enemy will stir fear, doubt, and self-protection. But the voice of God builds faith, hope, and trust, especially through the hard seasons. And when someone speaks to you from a place of fear or control, learn to address the spirit behind the words, not attack the person. Jesus loved Peter deeply. He did not reject him, but he rejected a lie he was unknowingly speaking. Let's set our mind on the things of God. Let's be willing to let God have his way, have his plan, because ultimately it brings life. Just as Jesus suffered and died, he rose again on the third day. And always, when we go through suffering, God's intent is to bring life to us. And my prayer is that you would know that life today and know him in your suffering. God bless you.